Have you ever felt like you're always one step behind what people expect from you? Like no matter how hard you try, it's never good enough. That's how William lived. Since he was a kid, the idea of perfection followed him like a shadow. At home, he was constantly compared to his more outgoing cousins. At school, he was the quiet kid in the back row, the type who knew the answers but stayed silent, afraid of getting it wrong and becoming a joke. To William, failure wasn't an option, and that kept him from even trying. To others, he was just shy. But inside, he carried the weight of feeling broken, inadequate, imperfect. The fear of failure clung to him like a second skin. His hands would sweat during presentations. In group projects, he avoided speaking. And little by little, he started to believe he wasn't special. Until one day, in elementary school, his teacher handed out folded papers at the end of class. They weren't tests. They were letters, one written personally for each student, with honest words about what she saw in them. When William read his, time stood still. You think no one notices you, but I see you. I see your effort, your kindness, your attentive eyes. You have a rare heart, William. And one day, that's going to change lives. He didn't fully understand what she meant. After all, what difference does a good heart make in a world that praises loud voices and big achievements? Still, for some reason, he kept that letter, folded carefully between the pages of a book he almost never opened. And there it stayed, forgotten for years. Meanwhile, William grew up carrying a silent conflict inside him. On the outside, he seemed calm, polite, reserved. On the inside, he was full of doubts. What if he was never good enough for the job he dreamed of? What if he disappointed the people who believed in him? What if God also expected a perfect version of him that he'd never be? That question echoed silently during the hardest days, especially when things started to fall apart. The dream internship didn't work out. The most anticipated interview turned into radio silence. His plans kept hitting invisible walls. And without realizing it, William started to pull away. From friends, from faith, from himself. He felt like his imperfection disqualified him. Like maybe he really was just another face in the crowd, with nothing to offer. But it was in that quiet phase that something unexpected happened. While organizing the bookshelf in his old room at his parents' house, a piece of paper fell out of a dusty book. It was the teacher's letter. Yellowed, aged. But the words now seemed to shine in a whole new way. You have a rare heart. One day this will change lives. He read that line over and over, trying to understand why, even after all this time, those words still hit him so hard. And then came the question that stopped him in his tracks. What if it's in his imperfection that God wants to begin something? If you've ever felt like your pain or your flaws disqualify you, comment below with one word that describes that feeling. Sometimes saying it out loud is the first step to healing inside. William didn't know it, but that rediscovered letter was the first move in a story that was just getting started. Because in that very moment, just when he almost threw it away, his phone rang with a message he never expected to hear. He sat on the edge of the bed with the letter in his hands, like he was holding something fragile and precious all at once. The teacher's handwriting was still the same, rounded, careful, like someone writing with their heart. He opened it slowly, almost afraid to reopen memories he'd spent a lifetime trying to forget. And there it was. William, you have something that can't be taught. Sensitivity. Don't ever let the fear of messing up dim your light. His eyes filled with tears as he read that first sentence. Because that's exactly what had happened. Fear had dimmed everything. His spontaneity, his dreams, his courage to try. He remembered the essay he wrote in an old notebook, unsure if it was any good, too afraid to ask. The topic was, what would you like to change in the world? While everyone else talked about amazing inventions and superhero feats, he wrote about silence. About how the words we don't say shape us too. And how the world needed more people who knew how to listen. The teacher didn't just read that essay, she was moved by it. And in a rare impulse, she read it aloud to the whole class. William, sitting in the last row, froze. When he heard his name being praised, his instinct was to look down. He thought it was a joke, that people were laughing at him. It was easier to believe it was sarcasm than to allow it to be real. But she wasn't mocking. She was seeing him. And now, years later, he realized that woman had seen something even he couldn't see. The letter's words kept echoing. You don't need to be the loudest or the most popular. You just need to be yourself. And that's already beautiful. He closed his eyes, almost like he was back in that classroom. The sound of the chalkboard, the laughter, her footsteps down the hallway. And the way, with one simple gesture, she had changed something inside him. But back then, he wasn't ready to believe. He didn't know yet that sometimes a compliment is harder to accept than a critique, because it asks us to see ourselves in a new way. A way full of grace, of worth. In that quiet room, William felt something break inside. But this time it wasn't pain. It was a kind of relief. Like for the first time in years, he had permission to just be himself. And that wasn't small. That was everything. As he breathed deeply, he ran his fingers across the back of the paper, like he was caressing a piece of his own story. And that's when he saw something he'd never noticed before. A sentence, handwritten, right at the bottom of the letter. Maybe he hadn't seen it back then, or maybe he chose to forget. But now it was clear as ever. One day you'll touch lives with your words. He read it slowly. Once, twice, 3 times. It felt like it was written for this very moment. But how? How could someone who's been hiding for so long touch someone's life with words? For a second, that old doubt tried to creep back in. But this time, something inside him responded differently. What if she was right? William spent the whole night with that sentence echoing in his mind. You'll touch lives with your words one day. He couldn't shake the feeling it stirred. Like suddenly a door had cracked open inside. But he was still cautious. He didn't know what to do with this new urge to say something. Until, in a shy move, he opened his laptop, created an anonymous profile on a forum about adult insecurities, and started writing. No filters, no fluff, just what he felt. He wrote about the letter, about how he'd spent years thinking that being quiet meant being invisible. He wrote about the fear of failure, about a childhood spent in silence, and the feeling of never being enough. And at the end, he left a question. What if our imperfections are exactly where miracles begin? Without overthinking it, he hit post. His heart raced like he'd shared too much. But at the same time, he felt lighter. Less than 24 hours later, the post was full of replies. Some short, some emotional. It's like you told my story. You made me cry, thank you. I've never commented here before, but I had to tell you this touched me. He read each one with a lump in his throat. For the first time, his words were going beyond his world. Reaching real people. People who, like him, carried hidden scars. It was like, by opening up his own pain, he had built a bridge. Among the many comments, one in particular stood out. Have you ever thought of sharing this in person? Maybe in a support group? I bet a lot of people would relate. He hesitated. Public speaking was still one of his biggest fears. But that suggestion stuck in his mind like a silent challenge. And against all his instincts, he went for it. He found a support group for young adults in the city, sent a message, confirmed his attendance, and almost backed out minutes before leaving. But he went. He sat in a circle of strangers, hands sweaty, breathing fast. The facilitator asked everyone to introduce themselves, no pressure. When it was his turn, he took a deep breath. Started small. About his childhood. His fear. A letter. And before he knew it, he was opening up completely. Even parts he'd never said out loud. And no one laughed. No one corrected him. They just listened. With focused eyes full of respect. It felt different from anything he'd experienced. For the first time, he wasn't the weird kid in the last seat. He was William. And he was being seen. As the group ended, a guy who had stayed quiet most of the time walked up to him, a bit awkward, and said, "You think you don't have a voice, but yours reached me today." William didn't respond. not out of fear but because of emotion. It was like something inside him was finally clicking. But he still had no idea what was coming next. The following weeks felt different. Not because everything changed overnight, but because for the first time, William was changing on the inside. The voice he used to silence was now being heard. Still shaky, still unsure at times, but real. And that was enough. Until one random afternoon, he got an unexpected message from an old friend. She worked as a counselor at a local school and was organizing an event about teen emotional health. "William, I read your post. Would you consider sharing your story? Talk about self-confidence, vulnerability, the stuff you described so well." His first reaction was to say no. He was still the same William who preferred silence to risk. But before replying, he looked at the teacher's letter, now framed on his desk. "You have something that can't be taught." He read that line again and took a deep breath. Maybe it wasn't about being ready. Maybe it was about being willing. And he was. He said yes. On the day of the event, he walked into the school with his heart pounding. Cold hands, nervous stomach, like those childhood presentations. But something was different. Now he knew he didn't have to be perfect, just real. He stepped onto the small stage in the event room, faced a group of distracted teens on their phones, and began. His voice shaky at first, the words hesitant, but little by little he told his story. Not as someone with all the answers, but as someone still figuring things out. He talked about the years he spent trying to look strong, the fear of failure, and how it had paralyzed him. And about the day a letter reminded him that sensitivity is also strength. In the respectful silence, a boy raised his hand. "I'm scared to speak too. But now, I don't think I'm the only one." That hit William hard. It was like he saw himself in that kid. And something inside him broke. Not from pain but from freedom. The old shame was turning into a bridge. Connection. Purpose. After his talk, the school principal came up to him, thanked him, praised his courage, and made a proposal. "We want to keep working on these themes with the students. How about writing a monthly column for us? Something about emotions, what it's like to be a man and still feel. About real vulnerability." William smiled. It was new, challenging, but it made sense. Because little by little he realized, what once made him hide, now helped him reach people. And here's the important part. If you've ever been through something similar, if you've ever been afraid to be who you are, share it in the comments. Sometimes your truth is exactly what someone else needs to read today. Back home, he sat at his computer, heart still racing. He started sketching ideas for his first column. But before he could type a single line, a new notification popped up. A message from a name he didn't recognize. He opened it, curious. It was short but powerful. "Hi, William. I'm the daughter of the teacher who wrote that letter. I found your post by chance. And I think we need to talk." William read the message more than once. After everything that had happened in the past few days, it felt almost symbolic that the teacher's daughter would reach out now. They scheduled a video call for that same night. The woman on the screen had eyes just like her mom's, kind, focused, like someone who listens with their heart. She introduced herself warmly and got right to the point. "My mom passed away a few years ago, but I want you to know something. She talked about you until her last days. She used to say you had a light. You just needed to believe in it." That hit William in a way he didn't expect. He put a hand to his face, holding back tears. It felt like all the loose pieces of his life were finally coming together. That letter, forgotten for so long, was more than old words. It was a seed. And now he saw it. God had used every pain, every silence, every flaw, as fertile ground. He wasn't broken. He was being grown. In the days that followed, he felt a strange urge to return to where it all began. He drove to the school where he'd studied as a child. It looked different, of course. New gates, freshly painted walls. But inside, it still had the same narrow hallways, the smell of books, distant laughter. He walked slowly to his old classroom. It was empty. He opened the door and stepped in. For a moment, it felt like time had rewound. The chalkboard still there, his seat in the back untouched. He approached the board with reverence, touched the cold surface with his fingertips, like touching his past. And then, without rushing, he picked up a piece of chalk and wrote in the corner like a quiet prayer. "Thank you, teacher. I am who I am." Because someone believed in the quiet kid. That was it. That woman, with her simple words, had planted a truth that neither time nor fear could erase. God had used his imperfection as a path. He didn't ask him to be outgoing or to speak beautifully, just to be real. A few weeks later, William stood on another stage, this time as a volunteer speaker at emotional health meetups. He spoke with ease, with truth, no masks. The audience was diverse. Teens, adults, teachers, moms. He shared his story, not to be applauded, but to remind everyone that sometimes what we see as flaws are actually our purpose. He ended his talk with a sentence that had become his mantra. God doesn't need the perfect. He needs the real. He closed his notebook, smiled, and looked straight at those listening. Or maybe it was just a soft voice whispering truth into our ears. Stop trying to be perfect. It's exactly where you fail that God begins to move. If this story spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you want to keep walking with us, subscribe to the Living Hope channel. There's always a new word waiting for you here, because God is still writing stories with imperfect people like you and me.